1,000 boats hail the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, and street parties across Britain defy the wind and rain. The barge she sat in like a burnished throne burnt on the water. For her own person, it beggared all description, as Shakespeare might have said today if it hadn't rained. So it rained on her parade, but then water was pretty central to today's events, and the people turned out en masse anyway. 1,000-strong flotilla on the Thames, the Queen on a gilded barge. It was all very, well, Elizabethan. Here's Andy Davis.
First sounded the trumpets, then came the quarter peal of 8 church bells. With the royals duly assembled and their eager subjects swelling the banks, Britannia momentarily brushed aside the notion that it no longer ruled the waves. And in quite some style. It was a truly striking sight. More than 1,000 vessels, among them skiffs, longboats, fireboats and steamboats, all bobbed their way down the Thames, at times evocative perhaps of what 17th century flotillas here might have looked like. This modern Royal Armada, on an ancient waterway at high water, was probably about as high octane as a 4-knot row-by gets. This afternoon the salutes echoed down the Thames, from LMS Princess Elizabeth, a relic of the steam age, to Janthia, a relic of the war years, leading the way for the Dunkirk little ships. On the banks, on balconies, on rooftops, from nearly every vantage point above this section of the Thames, they watched, they cheered, draped in Union Jacks. Atop the royal barge, the Queen waved, and a 35-year younger monarch waved back. She never got a flotilla in the Silver Jubilee.
I thought it was wonderful. It's very colourful and there's so many different boats and everybody is in such a good mood and it's the most incredible atmosphere.
It's just fantastic. It's brilliant how many people have come out and everybody's waving and all the flags are out, and it's just fantastic fun. Great day.
It's got to be said, these are extraordinary scenes, and the crowd here along this stretch of the river are lining up 8 deep, and this basically goes on for 7 miles either side of the Thames. And the organisers were saying all along that they were going to deliver something like theatre on the water, and what they've produced before this mass audience, it's got to be said, is really rather dramatic. There was a huge build-up to this event. I think it's fair to say on this occasion the hype was justified.
But it didn't all go according to plan, such as the moment earlier in the day when Prince Charles, among others, momentarily forgot they were singing a 2-verse version of the national anthem. A gathering of Republicans made their voices heard too, for them Armageddon Day. And then, of course, there was the weather. Damp and cold. There were even some reports of people suffering from hypothermia on the boats, but still they flocked stoically into Battersea Park for a festival where they drank tea, formed orderly queues and gathered round the TV. Britain in its element, and eulogies for the Queen in abundance.
Without the monarchy, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, without the Queen we'd have been a republic by now, because there were certain politicians that wanted to make us a republic.
Is that so bad?
Absolutely so bad. Well, you see what happened to France.
As the rain set in, the Downing Street street party, part of the so-called big lunch, ended up indoors, a U-turn the PM couldn't avoid. But they all seemed happy enough. And back on the river this evening, as the flotilla wound down, the band struck up. Here the royal family got moving to some nautical airs and sea shanties. Yet another image we may never again witness in our lifetimes.
Of course, it's not just in London that people have been celebrating. Union flag bunting is decking out streets right across Britain. So let's have a look at what people got up to around the country. Kibworth in Leicestershire might be a fair distance from the river pageant on the Thames, but people were there in spirit. They turned the local pub into a boat. And across the Midlands, people turned out to celebrate despite at times being battered by the rain. In Newcastle, a charity that helps homeless people was one of the organisations across the country holding a Jubilee big lunch. The people at this one laid on a spread for hundreds. And in one area of Cardiff, the Royal Street Party has become something of a tradition. They did the same thing for the Silver Jubilee back in 1977 and for last year's royal wedding. And some of the guests remember all three. Everyone there obviously enjoying themselves, but there appears to have been more enthusiasm in some parts of the country than in others. Of the 9,500 Jubilee street parties planned across Britain, more than 3,500, that's around a third, were in London and surrounding counties. But there were only 97 street parties planned in Scotland, just 1% of the total, despite Scots making up 8% of the population. Of course, it's hard to draw conclusions because we don't know how many people actually went to each event. Take Lancashire. Despite being one of England's biggest counties, only 135 streets held parties. But this one, in Morecambe, was well attended enough. Organisers were trying to break the record for the longest street party ever. Thousands braved the weather over 1.5 miles of the promenade. And in Belfast, a special service was held at St Anne's Cathedral to mark the Diamond Jubilee. The Dean of Belfast, John Mann, said the Queen had been consistently gracious over 60 years of her reign. And to see a selection of the best images today, go to the website channel4.com/news. And later in the programme, we'll be looking at why it was so many people defied the weather to take part in the event. We'll be talking to Boris Johnson and hopefully Lord Salisbury, the event organiser.